All right, so today we're going to be working on installing these beautiful new adjustable strut mounts. This is specifically going to be an installation for a set of KW V2s on a Volvo 850R. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first things first, we got to identify which ones go where. So this one, as you can see, it says FL. That's going to be our front left. Easy way to remember is the orientation is this needs to be pointing towards the firewall. So we got our other one on the other side. Now the first piece to this, which is quite uncommon to the way that most of us are used to installing these strut mounts and bearing plates, as it comes, it's going to go ahead and be loose just like this with the spring seat and obviously your bearing plate here. So first part, we got to go ahead and loosen these and get this piece loose, because when you actually are assembling your strut, this is going to be mounted underneath here. So we'll make more sense of it as we go along. All right, so now we have the wheel off. As you can see here, here's the KW V2 in all of its glory. We're gonna go ahead and start by taking these two bolts off to make sure it's loosened from our knuckle. And for me, one's a 17 and one's an 18. So let's go ahead and get this part. One last tidbit while you're in here, as you can see, I've loosened this first bolt. Got one here kind of holding it in place for now. One other thing I always suggest is going ahead and removing this ABS wheel speed sensor so that you don't tear it out and have another problem to fix. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and loosen this last bolt here when the time is ready. But now, what we're gonna do is go ahead and remove these three. As you can see, I kind of started the process here because two can hold it on. Totally your call on what you want to do. As you can see, I've loosened kind of all the nuts. Now everything's pretty much holding on this. So I'll go ahead and remove this last one, go ahead and pull up my strut brace. And when I'm ready, I'll go ahead and take this last bolt out, and then I can pull out the whole strut assembly. All right, so as you can see, I have everything removed. The strut brace is nice and loose. Put all my glorious hardware here, as well as some of the new pieces for the new brace, or the new mount. So now, let's go ahead and pull this thing out. One last piece I did forget to mention is go ahead and make sure you loosen the 15 or 16 millimeter nut on the end link. And that will be fastened to this side of the strut. So as you can see, now we got the original strut out here. That is nice and loose for us to go ahead and remove this, and boom, we now have at least the first portion of this off. Now we got to take this nut, and then we'll take this old spring seat off, and we'll go ahead and start with the install of the BNE mount. All right, so real quick, just made a quick notice here. So KW typically is using a different thread pitch than standard Volvo hardware that we had on the OEM suspension. So BNE sent this nut in my outer portion of my hand with the white nylon. As you can see, I go and put this on, and it starts trying to cross thread. Taking a look at the threads, you can easily tell these are a lot wider and coarse than these are. And so here's the one that came with KW, which is the appropriate depth. So just a word of the wise, make sure unfortunately you're going to want to reuse this hardware, just to make sure that you're not cross-threading and damaging your already extremely expensive KWs. All right, so we're back at it again. This is a great time to go ahead and clean this up, so I'm going to go ahead and use some quick detailer to go ahead and clean that, and then it's time to put this on in. Got to get that installed on this first, and then we can go ahead and put everything on top of the KW so that we can reinsert it into that, and then fasten all 4 of those adjustment screws. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get this party started. We got 2 of these new studs in place. I'm going to go ahead and put this underneath, and then we'll put a washer on top and a nut to get it held, and then I will put in this last one here. All right, so if you got a strut brace, I would highly suggest you go ahead and fix it back in place. So I am all done at this point. So now it's time to go ahead and put this on top of my KW strut. I had one piece of advice: when you do separate this from this piece, I tried to keep it oriented in the same direction so that when I go and I put this on the shock, it is close to alignment for these screws to be fastened with these. All right, so we're back. We have finished the install on this. You can't really see it too well, but the silver collar that looks like this. This goes onto the shaft first, and you remove the plate that sits underneath for the stock shock tower configuration, and then you're going to go ahead and throw this on. Make sure your springs aligned and in the track. As you can see, mine is butted up at the end of it, and now we have to orient this like it's going back in the car, and then making sure that this is aligned appropriately again to go ahead and fasten it into here. So here we go. All right, so everything is completely fastened and tightened up here, and we have finished everything down here. So as you can see, we plugged back in the ABS, wheel speed sensor, and the end link. Both bullets have been torqued down. All three of those mounting points have been, this has been tightened in. All four of those have been placed. Important thing to keep in mind is you want to use those more center holes for mounting. And that's about it for this side. We'll transition to the next side. All right, so we have our next side ready to roll. We have removed everything in this space. One thing I always like to do is I always put the nuts back on where I can, or keep them in an associated location so I know which way they go. Another tip that I have is whenever you're taking bolts off, keep them in the orientation in which they go on the car. So for these, they go through that way and then the nut goes on that way. Easy way to remember is the threads go to the back. So yeah, at this point now it's time to disassemble our KW, take off all this old stuff here, and soon enough we'll have that on and we'll put that on in here. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take this apart. This is going to be our 22, so we can go ahead and remove that, and that'll allow us to pull off the top there. All right, so now I got that loose. So here's our first piece here we're taking off, and then we're gonna go ahead and take this one off as well. As you can see, these springs are pretty short, so disclaimer, use your spring compressors if that makes you feel more comfortable. I just knew from my initial assembly that these were shorter, so I never had any concerns going ahead and pulling it off like this. But here's our second nut here, and now we have this finally gone, and this as well. So now we are back to assembly, and so I'm gonna go ahead and try and do this one-handed with y'all. So this does slide on here, but make sure that you don't make the mistake that I almost just did, and make sure that you pull off the flange here. All right, nice tight fit there. All right, so this one goes on here, and you're gonna have it with that taper up. All right, so now it is time to take our spring plate and this top. We're gonna take these 4 out, take this and take this, and we're gonna go ahead and put these on here and then reuse this nut. Remember, the KW has a different nut than what Ben offers in the kit, so please make sure you reuse that hardware. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this taken care of. One hand is not gonna be enough for me to get this done. All right, so we have our bushing on appropriately. We have the spring butted all the way up on the metal seat. Now all of this hardware is loose. So we're just gonna go ahead and take this and put this up here for later use. All right, so now we got this. And so now this is going to go on here. So quick thing, piece of advice, go ahead and align this. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this so that it's about here. And then I'm gonna have this aligned, basically pointing in that direction, but with this straight. So I'm gonna go ahead and use both hands real quick. We'll go ahead and rotate this. All right. So now I have rotated the strut assembly here. Now this is at that angle. Again, this is, the spring seat is completely butted up here, so looks like we're in good shape to go ahead and put that top nut on here, and we'll go ahead and be able to put this back in. And just a quick piece of advice, when this was assembled, someone used, I don't know, anti-seize or something like that in these holes. So just for a quick visual, this, and this is how it was initially fastened. When you go ahead and put it back in, I would try and utilize those same holes again. All right, so now I got things assembled here. As you can see, this is nice and straight. And in my fastening of this, I have unfortunately rotated this. So now I can rotate this by hand and give it a pretty close approximation of how it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just one piece of advice when you're going ahead and fastening this top nut. This is a 10mm and this nut itself is a 22. So I just take a nice ratcheting wrench that's a 22 as well as a 10 to hold it steady, and then go ahead and fasten it. So I'm gonna go ahead and rotate this, and then we'll take a look at putting in the top plate and then fastening this to that top plate. All right, so now we're gonna be going ahead and installing this in here. One thing to note for me and my setup with this strut brace that I have here, I have stacked washers here to provide a nice even mounting space and not have this bracket contorting itself, just trying to make things fit a little bit better. I have 2 here and I have 1 here. So this is my cheap OBX brace, the only thing that could really clear the constraints of that top boost pipe. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in the hardware and getting this fixed. All right, so I have all the hardware here and fastened for the most part. Gotta torque them down. One piece of advice is kind of leave these a little bit loose. As you start installing them, if you can get one installed, then put your second one on. These obviously have a little bit of slot of adjustability, so it'll make it easier for you to get it properly in place and get the holes and everything to line up so you can put the fasteners in. So I would suggest just get your first one going, leave it a little bit loose, go to your second, go to your third, whatever ones you want to start on is totally your call. For me, I had double washer here, single washer here, no washer here. So wanted to get this done first, then that, then this. But yeah, now this is in place, so I'm gonna go ahead and get these locked in place. And then shortly we can take this hardware, put the strut up through here, and then we'll go ahead and fix the 4 torques that hold that camber plate in place. All right, so now we are completely fastened. These have all been torqued to 20 foot-pounds. All these have been torqued down. I want to say those are 18, 22, somewhere around there. So now that that's all in, I have just a few bolts remaining here. We got to do our end link, and then we got to get our 2 hub bolts back in, and then we should be all good to go. All right, so the end link has been fastened. The ABS wheel speed sensor has been plugged back in. Both of these bolts have been tightened back down, so we are ready to roll. So now I just got to put the wheels on, and now we get to enjoy the adjustability of these BNE top mounts. Thanks for watching. Till next time. All right, so everything's all wrapped up, everything's tight. One other piece of advice is these mounts tend to make the car a little bit higher. So to make sure I'm keeping or I'm staying closer, I went ahead and dropped my coil adjustment, my ride height adjustment on the KW's 5 threads to be here. And I want to say my count was 24 to begin with, so now I'm at 19 threads from the bottom. And I'm pretty happy with that. But otherwise, the car is all done. Everything's nice and stable. Looks great.